Shalom, I'm Moriah Ben Avraham, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the meaning of the Hebrew word Elohim, most often mistranslated as G-O-D, God. If you have not already done so, please subscribe below and follow this channel, Talmidei Yehoah, where you will learn many important teachings about the word of Yah, just like this one. So let's get into it. What is the meaning of the Hebrew word Elohim? Let's take a look at the very first usage of this in what we now refer to as the Tanakh. That's the Torah, the Nevi'im, meaning the prophets, and the Ketuvim, the writings. In the very first book of that grouping, we have the book that's commonly understood to be Genesis, but in Hebrew we call it Breshith. And in the very first verse of that book, it reads like this: Breshith bara Elohim eth hashamayim ve'eth haaretz. Here we see the word Elohim used. And as you can see on the right, it's usually translated with the English word God. But like we already said, that's not actually a translation. It's a substitution, because the meaning of the word God is not equivalent with the Hebrew word Elohim. We're going to see that in depth. Now, if we just notice how translators, let's say for the King James Version translation, variously translated this Hebrew word, notice the variance, notice the differences. They translated this same Hebrew word, Elohim, as God 2,346 times. So that's by far the most popular way they translated it. God with a capital first letter, G-O-D. But then 244 times they used lowercase g. 5 times as judge. Once with all caps God. Twice as goddess. Twice as great. Twice as mighty. Once as angels. Once as exceeding. Once as Godward, and once as godly. As we already said, we should never really use the English word G-O-D as if it's a translation of the Hebrew word Elohim. It's a substitution. They have different meanings. And in a separate video, we're going to show you exactly what God actually means. But suffice it to say, it is not equivalent to Elohim. We should just use, in English, a transliteration, which is use English letters to spell out how you would phonetically say Elohim. And that way we wouldn't be saying anything that we shouldn't say. And we'll see in a future video that we shouldn't use God, because God is literally an idol. God is an idol. We should not be praying or worshiping God. Abraham never prayed to God. He prayed to Elohim, specifically Yehovah Elohim, and that's the being we should be praying to. But without going more in depth into that right now, we want to focus here on what does this word Elohim actually mean. And the way we're going to get at that, we're going to look at the pictographic letters to get to the root understanding of this Hebrew word. You see, in Hebrew, all Hebrew words are based on a parent root made up of 2 pictographic letters. In ancient Hebrew, all the letters on all the words were written not with what we see as the modern Hebrew script, which you cannot really understand from modern Hebrew what the symbol actually represented. But anciently, the symbols that were used for each of the otiot, as are the letters, as we might call them in English, of the Hebrew Aleph Beth, all of those letters actually were pictographs. And they represented not just a sound that we would make, but also an idea, a concept, because the concept was embedded in the very picture that was used. So here we can see that the root word for Elohim is El, Aleph Lamed. So let's understand Aleph Lamed from the pictographic letters that are used to make up that name. Starting with the first, Aleph. we see that the aleph is drawn like the head of a bull. It represents strength because bulls are strong. So when we see the letter aleph as part of a root, we know there's something to do with strength, something strong about the concept that's being formed with this letter, with this sign, Hebrew ot. Now, next letter that's used in this is lamed. Lamed is drawn like a shepherd's staff, and it represents authority because a shepherd holds a staff in his hand. He has authority. He's directing the sheep. So whoever holds the staff is one with authority. Now, when we put these two concepts together and say El, aleph lamed, we say the strong authority. So the word El from the pictographic meaning means the strong authority. You'll find many people say it means power, strength, strong, but they don't often add the thought of authority. We should always realize Elohim is not like a non-living thinking power, something like electricity. Yahweh is actually our Elohim. He is our strong authority. And he's not just a power in the universe. He's an authoritative power who is directing what is taking place in the universe. He spoke and it existed. He commanded and it was done. He said, let there be light. There was light. So the Elohim of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, when we think of it as an Elohim of theirs, we're saying this is the strong authority they had. El is the strong authority. Now, added to the parent root El, which already describes the strong authority, the one we literally bow down to. When we build the word Elohim, we're adding now to that base concept. The first thing we do is we add the letter He to that base concept. He means behold. It's drawn like a man with his hands in the air. Behold, something is revealed. Wow. So this is the idea or the concept that is carried with the letter He. So from this, we add He now to the idea of strong authority, and we say it is the strong authority revealed. So this is the strong revealed authority. In Hebrew, we say Eloah. Finally, we add now the suffix, which is made up of two otiyot, yod and mem. Yod is drawn like a man's hand and basically means to do, make something happen, and mem means waters. And this yod mem suffix is usually used in most cases to pluralize something. So many people get mixed up because they see this ending that means plural in most cases. But what people don't realize is that this im ending is not limited to plurality. In some cases, this im ending literally means the superlative, something supreme. And that's what it means here at the end of Eloah. So we say Elohim, we're saying not just the strong authority, the strongest revealed authority. Let's just notice how the Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible pointed this out in its article on God. It states that Elohim is used in a singular sense, even when, as a concession to the plural form of the word, the accompanying verb is in the plural. And you can look at several scriptural references to see this. They cite Genesis 1:26, 20:13, 35:7, and Exodus 22:9, or if you're using Hebrew text, 22:8. Now, they go on to say this use is often called the plural of majesty or plural amplitudinous. In other words, it's like the royal we. It is not a representation of plurality as we're seeing here. It's still saying that it's a singular word, but used with this plural form only to show amplitudinous or the greatness of that which is being spoken of. So when we're speaking of the strong authority, What we're saying here is that it's not just the strong authority, it is the strongest authority revealed. And that's the one we bow down to. We bow down to Elohim because Elohim is the strongest revealed authority. That's why Yahweh is the one we pray to as our Elohim. That's why when they fell down on their faces, they said, Yahweh hu ha-Elohim. They weren't saying a plurality of beings were Elohim. They said Yahweh, who, meaning in the singular, hu ha-Elohim. Yahweh is the strongest revealed authority. Now, some people get mixed up because they look further down in the book of Breshith, which, by the way, if you look right in the verse we just read, Breshith bara Elohim, bara is a verb in the singular, and it says Breshith bara Elohim eth hashamayim ve'eth haaretz. So it's Elohim is not being revealed to us in these verses as a plurality. Elohim is singular and used with the singular sense of the verb. But people get confused when they get to verse 26 and it reads in English, they say, and Elohim said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Now, the reason they get mixed up is they're reading this in English and thinking by looking up in, let's say, a Strong's Concordance or something, that the word translated as Elohim is in a plural form. And then they see let us, and they say, oh, you see, it must be more than one. Looking at the Hebrew, which I have up here now on the left side, they ignore the fact that the Hebrew verb translated as said is in the singular form. It's the third person singular. It says, Vayomer Elohim. So it's Elohim is connected not with what's being said after, but with the verb that's in front. Vayomer Elohim in the singular. So Elohim is singular. And Elohim said, Na'aseh Adam, B'Tselmenu, Kidmuthenu. Let us make man, or Adam, in our image, after our likeness. The use here of the plural, Na'aseh, is, as we just saw, the use of the plural of majesty, the pluralis amplitudinus. It's to show superlative. It's like saying, and said, the strongest revealed authority, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. The idea of the use of Elohim in the form that looks plural, but is actually singular, as we see with the verb that's used with it, is not about plurality. It's about the supreme, the ultimate, the strongest revealed authority. People don't think, if the author of this text had in mind that Elohim was plural, why in the very next verse does it use the singular tense of the verb bara? When it says, Vayivra Elohim, that word, and Elohim created man, this is not in the plural sense. If you wanted to say, use the plural form of the verb bara, it would have to say Vayivru Elohim, not Vayivra. The very fact that it says Vayivra means that the author never had in mind that Elohim was plural. Elohim is a singular word. It just has a plural form because it's emphasizing that it is the strongest revealed authority. And so the singular, Elohim, made man in his image. In the image of likeness, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Nothing plural about the word Elohim. The author of Breshith was Moshe. And Moshe was the one to whom Yahweh spoke directly when he even spoke to the entire nation of Yisrael, giving them what we now call the Ten Commandments, or better referred to in its Hebrew thought as the Asereth Hadvarim, the 10 matters. And the very first of those matters, as recorded for us in Shemoth, chapter 20, beginning in verse 2, he said, Anochi, I am Yahweh Elohecha, that is your Elohim. He is singular. I am your Elohim. Not we are. I am your Elohim. Asher Hotzeitziko, who brought you out of Me'eretz Mitzrayim, out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of bondage, Beit Avadim. The one Elohim, whose name is Yehovah, brought us out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of bondage. It's not a plurality. Elohim is the strongest revealed authority. This is consistent. Think about it this way. Even when we use this word Elohim to refer to idols. Remember, we saw that it was translated with a lowercase g. It's the same Hebrew word, but translators trying to make a distinction between when it's an idol versus when it's the Elohim of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, capitalize it when it's Yehovah and leave it lowercase when it's an idol. But it's the same Hebrew word. And even when we speak of singular idol, not idols, but just a single idol, that idol is referred to with the same plural form of the Hebrew word Elohim. As you can see here in the book of Shoftim, Judges chapter 11, verse 24, where an idol named Chemosh is referred to as an Elohim, but it's a singular idol named Chemosh. It says here, will you not possess whatever Chemosh notice they put lowercase g, your God gives you to possess? The Hebrew for that is Chemosh Elohecha. It's in the plural form. It's for the singular idol named Chemosh, not many. Just like later on in the verse it says, so whatever Yehovah, our Elohim, takes possession of before us, we will possess. Yehovah is a singular being, and he is our Elohim. You idol worshipers, you worship Chemosh, your Elohim. We worship Yehovah, singular being, who is our Elohim. The word Elohim is not a plural word. It's not in the plural. It has what we might call a plural form, but that plural form was used for amplitude, to emphasize the strongest revealed authority when we really understand what the word Elohim actually means. Look at this verse. Remember when the Israelites made the golden calf? How many golden calves did they make? They only made one. But they used the very word Elohim in reference to that idol. And they even used the accompanying pronoun in the plural form. But it was still simply one calf, one idol that was being referred to. Let's read the verse in English. We'll look at it in Hebrew afterwards. And he received them at their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool, after he had made it a molten calf. And they said, these be thy gods. This is the King James Version, because I wanted you to see they carried with them this idea of the plurality of gods, Elohim, but it's not really plural. It's not plural in number. So here in the English, they said these because they wanted to translate Ele, which means these, as opposed to this, which is Zot. So instead of saying Zot, which is not what the Hebrew says, they just carried through in the translation and said, these be your gods. But again, this translation is misleading because in Hebrew thought, even though this pronoun is plural, and Elohecha is the plural way of saying Elohim, even though there's a plural form, and it's only one golden calf, and so a more accurate translation, which you see in more modern translations, is, this is your Elohim. This is your God, O Yisrael. Because that's the sense of the word Elohim is, this is your strongest authority. Even though it was an idol, this is what Aharon was actually saying when he said, Ele Elohecha. And so he was not thinking of the calf as being more than one. It was only one calf. The use of the plural form was used to represent the superlative. It was the supreme, not a plurality in number. And that's very important to understand, because when we're reading the text in English, we must keep in mind we're reading a translation. What we're trying to get at, though, is not the English or the translation. We're trying to get at what was the intent of these words when they were actually written. And the only way we can understand that is understand how ancient Hebrew was used. And ancient Hebrew used this, what we might call today a plural form, as a means of emphasizing the superlative, showing that it's not just the authority, but it is the supreme, the strongest revealed authority. We should have no confusion, just as none of the Hebrew writers, Hebrew prophets had any confusion about how many Elohim there were for Yisrael. It wasn't confused in the Aseret HaDvarim, nor was it confused by the later prophets like the prophet Yeshayahu, who wrote and said, Ani Yehovah ve'ein od, Zulathi ein Elohim. I am Yehovah, and there is none else. Beside me, there is no Elohim. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe to Talmidei Yehoah and hit like below. Shalom, shalom.